What do you make of what we've seen and are seeing now, Richard? Is this a piecemeal invasion taking place?
Yeah, I think. I think this is the ground invasion, the ground incursion that we were expecting, just by a different name. The information we're getting from both inside and from uh, the Israeli authorities, partial information on both sides, putting them together, it's clear that the Israeli army is now trying to encircle Gaza City, the biggest city, the capital of Gaza Strip, from the south and north. Gaza City is in the northern half of that enclave, and they've come in from the east. The tanks have come in through open ground in the east to the south of the city and moved up into a southern neighborhood called Zaytuna. And they're also clearing, as they put it, areas to the on the northeast and northwest corner of the Gaza Strip. We haven't had any reports of Israeli casualties. They are claiming that, as you say, that various numbers of Hamas militants have been taken out in various engagements.
Now, are we learning much, do you believe, about the capacity of Hamas from the action so far, from the operation so far, the fighting so far? Have we learned much about Hamas's ability to fight back against what is obviously a greatly superior force?
I think it's very early stages to say that. I mean, certainly the tanks have made progress, and that wasn't always a given. There were all sorts of talks of the tanks walking into an ambush from Hamas, rocket-propelled grenades and other anti-tank missiles. They don't seem to have had much effect so far. As I say, no reports of from the Israeli side of casualties or deaths of Israeli soldiers so far. On the other hand, that isn't the war that Hamas are going to be waging here. They're going to be waging guerrilla wars from their tunnels and from, one would imagine that they've withdrawn a fair number of their fighters to the south of the enclave to attack Israelis later on. In the first, what is it, 3 days of this grand incursion, probably a bit early to draw any firm conclusions.
Right. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu is due to make a speech, isn't he, in the next few minutes, I think, according to the schedule. Is that a product, or to what extent is this a reflection of the Prime Minister being under pressure? Because he is under pressure, isn't he, from various sides in Israel?
Yes, and the developments which he has to engage with are coming just sort of fairly fast and furiously this afternoon. On the plus side, he will be delighted to announce that Israel has released its first hostage by force, if you like, as far as we can tell. They haven't given any details yet, but a young woman soldier from the army who was being held hostage, the IDF says it has released and returned her to her family. That's a young woman by the name of Private Ori Megadish. Very nice photo just been released of her with her family. On the other hand, more troublingly for Netanyahu, the other hostage families are beginning to stage protests saying, we want our families back. We want the hostage negotiations, the talk of a prisoner exchange to be resumed, even at the expense of stopping the ground invasion and the aerial bombardment.
Yes.
And Hamas have released a new hostage video showing 3 women hostages, one of whom makes a very impassioned plea to the camera, directed to Netanyahu, saying, you fouled up, we're paying the price for your foul up on that security lapse that allowed the October the 7th attacks to happen, and you've got to get us back by any means you can.
Lastly, Richard, when it comes to the hostages, what is to be made, if much can be made, of the statement from Hamas? There was one again recently which said 50 of the hostages had been killed in the bombing of targets in Gaza. What do people make of that?
Yeah, very hard to know really what to make of that. I mean, Hamas has an interest, of course, in using this as a scare to the Israelis. Hamas showed in that video, they showed that they were very aware of the arguments going on within Israel about what should be done about these hostages, whether concessions should be made on Palestinian prisoners. And I think this is obviously part of their psychological warfare. Whether it's true or not, We will only see, at the end of this conflict, or when this prisoner exchange, if it ever does, takes place. One has to say, I mean, it's been rather dismissed by the Israelis, this claim that 50 have been killed. One has to say that if it turns out they haven't been killed and they are ended up released, that is something that will be held against Hamas in future conflicts and in future cases where they make statements. Obviously, once it is a militant group, it's a designated terrorist group, you can argue that it doesn't have much credibility in the West, but it certainly has credibility in the Arab world, and that would be damaged if it been shown just to have made that figure up. Right. So, that's an interesting thing to look out for later on.